This happened a few years ago. I was 35 and thought I knew the outdoors. I had camped many times, but this time I craved the Alaskan wilderness. I wanted to escape my busy city life. The campsite felt isolated. Tall pines surrounded me. It was peaceful. I thought I was alone, but I never stopped thinking about what happened next. I set up my tent and made a fire. I planned to edit some photos by the firelight. Everything felt perfect. But on the second night, while I worked on my laptop, I heard something. Faint at first, it was rustling in the trees nearby. I thought it could be a bear or moose. I tried to calm myself, but the sounds were different. They were too close, almost deliberate. I shook it off and focused on my photos. Around midnight it happened again. This time it sounded like footsteps, slow and methodical. Something was moving around my campsite. I felt uneasy. I didn't know what to think, but something was definitely off. Days went by and the noises grew stranger. I found things scattered around my tent. My gear was out of place, and I noticed muddy footprints leading away from my camp. They didn't look like animal tracks. They looked human. Then I started hearing whispers, mostly at night, carried by the wind. I couldn't make out the words, but they felt like they were meant for me. I felt like I was being watched. I checked around often but found nothing, just trees and shadows. I spent hours staring into the dark, my heart racing whenever something moved. I thought about leaving, but something kept pulling me to stay. One day I found an old campsite. It felt eerie to walk through. Torn-up tents and old gear were lying around. I picked up a journal scattered on the ground. The pages were filled with chaotic writing. I couldn't make sense of most of it, but it mentioned feeling trapped inside a tent. Something had made the writer leave everything behind. I stood there, chills running down my spine. What happened here? Who camped before me? Was it possible I wasn't alone? I was starting to feel like I was being hunted. That night, it happened again. Footsteps, slow and heavy. I turned around, my throat tightening. I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, but I felt frozen in place. I could hear the leaves crunching behind me. Panic set in. The fire flickered, casting strange shadows. I scanned the area, but I saw nothing. My heart pounded as I listened. I thought about running, but felt glued to the spot. Then, in the darkness, I heard a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper. "Why are you still here?" I turned to look, but it was just shadows. I wanted to run, but my legs didn't move. I felt like I had done something wrong by being there. Finally, I grabbed my gear without thinking. What did I leave behind? I don't even know if anyone would find it. When I finally decided to leave, I felt an icy grip on my spine. I glanced back. The trees felt alive, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I ran. I didn't stop to think about what I might leave behind or where I might go. I just ran. The night felt heavy around me, the darkness swallowing the light of the fire behind me. My breath came in short bursts as the cold air burned my lungs. As I moved deeper into the forest, I could still hear the rustling of leaves, the echoing footsteps I now believed could be closer than I dared to think. I had no flashlight, just the dim glow of my laptop still in my backpack. I didn't dare to turn it on. I needed to escape whatever was haunting me out here. After several minutes, I reached a small clearing. My heart beat wildly, and I felt the urge to fall to my knees. But I forced myself to keep moving. With my pulse echoing in my ears, I took a moment to catch my breath and listen. The forest was quiet for the first time in days, but then I heard it again, a whisper barely audible drifting through the trees. "Why did you leave?" The voice felt intimate, like it was meant for me. Panic clawed at my throat. I wanted to respond, to demand to know who was speaking, but I was frozen. Instead, I took another step back, only to stumble over roots hidden in the dark. I fell hard, my wrist twisting painfully as I hit the ground. I grunted in pain, but quickly pulled myself up. I had to keep moving. On instinct, I turned away from the sound and pressed forward. My thoughts raced about what I had found at the old campsite and the journal's frantic entries. Fear coiled through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was retracing someone else's steps, a path that had led to something terrible. That old campsite loomed in my mind. Trapped inside a tent. The phrase echoed viciously. Even if I got out of the forest, I couldn't forget what I had seen. Suddenly I felt it, eyes watching me from the shadows. The hairs on my neck stood up, the icy grip returning. I turned my head rapidly, catching movement in my peripheral vision. Something slid between the trees, lurking just out of sight. My heart thundered. I turned again, now seeking the faintest light, anything that could lead me back to my car. But the forest seemed disorienting, each direction looking the same. Then I heard a snap. A branch cracked loudly behind me. I whipped around, my heart racing. That sound was clear and crisp, unmistakably close. Something was here. I didn't bother to think. I broke into a run again, pushing through the tangled underbrush and low branches. I didn't stop when I felt a thud against my shoulder, but it knocked me off balance and sent me tumbling to the cold ground again. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just outside the edge of my vision, watching. Their presence was darker than the night around them. Fear flooded my senses. In that moment, I realized I hadn't been alone, not for days. With renewed determination, I jumped back to my feet. I had to keep moving or I might never escape. But now, I was more scared than ever. I had to reach the road, had to find help. As I pushed forward, the only thought in my mind was, I needed to find out who was out there before it was too late. I ran, my feet pounding against the damp earth. The figure lingered in my mind, a shadow carved from fear. The whispers, the tormenting questions, they clung to me like pine sap. I needed to find my way out. I needed the road. Each step felt like a gamble. I veered left, then right, praying for some sign of familiarity. It was all a blur. The trees loomed around me like silent watchers. Every rustle seemed magnified in the stillness. My breath was ragged, each inhalation sharp with cold air. I pulled my coat tighter, but it barely kept the chill at bay. Then I heard it again, the whisper. "Why did you leave?" It felt closer now, slicing through the air. I stopped short, heart racing as I scanned the darkness. The voice was unmistakably human, yet hauntingly familiar. "Who are you?" No answer came, just silence, thick and suffocating. I felt like a fool talking to the night. I took another step when suddenly a low growl echoed from behind me. I spun around, eyes wide. A pair of gleaming eyes pierced the darkness. I couldn't tell if it was an animal or something otherworldly. My breath caught in my throat, and for a split second, time stood still. Then instinct kicked in, and I took off again, faster this time. Branches whipped against my skin, jagged and unforgiving. I dashed forward, desperately navigating the twisted trails of the woods. The growl morphed into a distinct sound, footsteps, heavy and persistent, following me. As I stumbled again, my laptop slid from my backpack, tumbling into the dirt. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back. The figure, the eyes, I could feel their weight on me. I wasn't leaving my only source of light behind. I snatched it up. With a trembling hand, I opened it, flicking on the screen for a brief moment. The bright glow flooded the area. In that instant, it illuminated the trees, revealing the contours of the clearing I'd just crossed. But it also showed me something else, a path branching off to the right, one that disappeared into even darker thickets. I stood frozen, considering my options. The footsteps stopped, and it was quiet once more. I could still feel the weight of the gaze, but where had it gone? "I'm not alone," I whispered to myself, trying to convince my racing heart. I could either stay near the light or plunge deeper into darkness. The grip of panic tugged at my mind, and I realized I had little time to think. Without fully comprehending my choice, I veered toward the new path, adrenaline surging through my veins. Maybe this would lead me to safety, or maybe it would lead me deeper into whatever haunted this place. I pressed onward, leaves crunching beneath my feet as the shadows closed in around me. I was not only running from what pursued me, I was also running towards something I didn't understand. Then I stumbled again. A twisted root caught my boot. I lost my balance and fell to my knees. As I looked up, breathless and terrified, I saw it. The glimmer of silver reflected back at me, a trap laid in wait. Realization hit me like ice water. This was no accident. Someone had set this up. The unease settled in my stomach, and an instinctive urge to run surged into my legs once more. But I had to know. Who had done this? That question loomed over me as I stood peering deeper into the shadows. Before I could process my next move, I heard the growl again, closer now, sounding almost like laughter. The sound sent chills down my spine. That mocking growl echoed off the trees, ricocheting in my head like a twisted melody. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just toying with me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I took a deep breath, trying to muster a shred of courage. I was not going to be an easy target. I had to keep moving. I glanced toward the silver glint again, but the trap was too close for comfort. I didn't trust my footing. Not here. In the dim light from my laptop, I focused on the new path. It felt less like a choice and more like my only escape. I started walking again, one careful step at a time. The trees grew thicker on either side, swallowing the little light I had left. My heart raced as shadows danced in my peripheral vision. Were they just trees, or was something waiting for me to make a mistake? As I pressed forward, I felt the fear clawing at my mind. Memories of past camping trips, the comfort of open skies and crackling campfires felt worlds away. Here it was all darkness, cold and lurking. Nothing felt safe. I caught another flicker of silver from the corner of my eye. This time, it wasn't just a trap. A sign was nailed to a nearby tree. I stumbled closer, wiping the wet leaves from the surface. It read, "Turn back." My breath hitched. A warning, or a trap. I didn't know who had put it there, but its presence was enough to tighten the knot in my stomach. "Turn back," I murmured. Why? I felt foolish, half expecting a response. But all I heard was silence and the weight of unwelcome eyes swelling in the shadows. I felt my pulse quicken again. Behind me the growls intensified. They were closer now, taunting my fear, prompting me to bolt. Without giving myself time to overthink, I swung back towards the path and moved faster, nearly sprinting. I could hear the footsteps now, a rhythmic pounding that matched my own. Panic surged through me, and before I knew it, my feet were carrying me off the trail. Branches clawed at my arms and face as I ducked beneath them. The last flicker of light from my laptop flickered out. I cursed under my breath. So much for light as a guide. Now it was just a heavy burden. Suddenly, the ground dipped beneath my feet. I stumbled down an incline, losing my balance and tumbling onto the forest floor. Winded, I took a moment to gather my wits. As I lifted my head, I froze. Illuminated by a full moon breaking through the treetops, there lay an ancient rusted cage, big enough to hold a person. My heart dropped as the implications rushed over me. Was this what they used? What kind of sick creature preyed on people here? Before I could process what I was seeing, I heard the growl again, now more of a roar. It was right behind me. A cold, creeping dread settled over me as I felt the tremor of footsteps shaking the ground beneath my body. I had to move. But how? With the cage before me, my escape route dwindled with each passing moment. Then I saw it. Behind the cage, a narrow gap between the trees that could lead me deeper into the unknown. Would it take me away from whatever hunted me, or lead me to a worse fate? The growl echoed again, My hand instinctively reached toward the dark void. I took a breath and pushed forward. I squeezed through the narrow gap, the rough bark scratching my arms as I shoved my way into the darkness. I could feel adrenaline spiking, but I wasn't ready to let it overpower my senses. I listened while forcing one foot in front of the other. The growl still echoed, but it was fainter now. Good. Maybe I'd bought myself some time. The trees closed in again, but this time the air felt different. It was damp and thick, almost suffocating. I pressed on, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of danger. My mind raced through possible scenarios, none of them reassuring. What lived in these woods? What hunted with such malice? Just ahead, there was movement. I froze, heart hammering in my chest as I squinted into the dark. A figure flickered between the trunks, barely visible. My breath quickened and I forced myself to stay still. Was it a person or something worse? I dared to take a step closer, straining to catch another glimpse. That's when I felt it. A wave of cold air sweeping past me, followed by the unmistakable scent of something rotten. I gagged and stumbled back, but I had already drawn too close. Suddenly a low snarl reverberated through the trees, closer now than ever. The figure was coming for me, moving like a shadow through the underbrush. I was no longer just a prey, I was now a target. I turned and ran. Branches whipped my face, but I didn't stop. The growl followed me, echoing like the clock of doom. Part of me wanted to scream, to let it out, but the instinct to remain silent pulled like a weight in my throat. I darted through the trees, my feet pounding into the ground. I skimmed past fallen logs and thorny bushes, praying none of them would trip me, crying for help without a voice. I didn't look back. I had to believe there was safety ahead, somewhere. Then, suddenly, I stumbled onto a clearing. The moon shone bright here, casting a wide silver glow that hugged the ground. I was breathing heavily, lungs burning, but I couldn't stop. Not now. In the middle of the clearing stood an old, abandoned cabin. It looked long forgotten, but it was the only option I had. The growling was growing louder again, the shadows around me shifting menacingly. I rushed toward the cabin. The door was ajar, swinging slightly in the night wind. I hesitated at the threshold. If I went in, I couldn't turn back. What if whatever was chasing me had already claimed it as its own? A new sound rang out, a shrill cry that nearly made me jump. I peered inside cautiously, straining my eyes to see in the dim light. "Please," I whispered, finding a shred of hope. Maybe I could find something to defend myself with, a weapon, anything. Then I heard it again. Something was close. I moved inside, every instinct yelling at me to be quiet and alert. Shadows danced on the walls, and my eyes darted from corner to corner. Something whispered from the back room, low and breathy. My heart jolted. I took another step inside when suddenly the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, trapped. The growl came again, deeper and more primal this time. I pressed my back against the wall, bracing myself for what would come next. I could almost see the amber eyes staring back at me through the darkness. What had I stepped into? Darkness enveloped me the moment the door slammed shut, leaving me with only the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the dusty window. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and in that time the sound of my panicked breathing filled the silence. I could feel it. Whatever was out there was close. I had to find somewhere to hide, but my options were slim. The back room loomed ahead. I hesitated, recalling that eerie whisper I'd heard, but if I stayed here, I was a sitting duck. The growl reverberated again, this time accompanied by a low thudding. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to move, stepping cautiously toward the darkness ahead. As I stepped inside the back room, the air turned colder. I reached out with my hand, fingers brushing against old furniture covered in layers of dust. I didn't have the luxury of time, so I pushed the thought of what might be lurking in the shadows aside and felt my way through the space. There had to be something, anything, that I could use. I stumbled against a table, accidentally knocking over a rusted metal object. It clattered to the floor with a loud echo. I froze, held my breath and listened. The growl ceased briefly, and then came a sinister chuckle from the shadows. "Nice try," it said, smooth like silk but laced with menace. I nearly jumped out of my skin as I turned toward the voice. A figure stepped out of the darkness, cloaked in shadows, but the outline of its body was unmistakable, tall and looming, with fingers that seemed to stretch out toward me. I backed up, feeling the wall press against my spine. My mind raced. Who was this? Was it friend or foe? "What do you want?" I croaked, fighting the tremor in my voice. "Just a little fun," it replied, and I could see its jagged teeth glint in the dim light. Before I could react, the growl returned, louder and fiercer than before. The weight of urgency hit me. I couldn't stay here. I darted to my right, searching for an escape, but the creature stepped forward, blocking my path. "Are you lost?" it taunted, eyes gleaming with predatory excitement. "No!" I shouted, desperation bursting forth. Then, without knowing why or how, I lunged for the nearest window. I smashed it open and climbed through, shards of glass slicing my palms as I landed on the other side. Pain flared, but I had no time to tend to it. In a single fleeting glance I could see movement in the trees just beyond the clearing. The creature inside the cabin let out a roar of frustration. Somehow it knew I had escaped. I took off running again, not daring to look back. The growl was replaced by a shattering of glass and the sound of heavy footsteps. I pushed through the brush, branches snagging at my clothes, the darkness seeming to close in around me once more. Then something caught my eye. A faint light flickering through the trees. Hope ignited within me, but would it lead me to safety or deeper into despair? I quickened my pace, heart racing, knowing whatever hunted me was still hot on my trail. The woods seemed to pulse with life, alive and alert to my every move, but I couldn't stop now. I didn't have that luxury. And just as I thought I might be safe, I heard the voice again, whispering chillingly, "You can't escape that easily." My stomach twisted. What had I stumbled into? The flickering light ahead became my only beacon. I pushed through the underbrush, stumbling over roots and rocks, adrenaline masking the pain in my palms. It danced between the trees like a lost star, drawing me closer despite the fear gnawing at me. I burst into a small clearing. The light was coming from a campfire, flickering dangerously. Sitting around it was a group of people, 3 or 4, huddled together, their faces illuminated by the flames. Relief washed over me momentarily, but I hesitated. They couldn't be the saviors I hoped for, not in a place like this. They weren't talking, just staring into the fire, their expressions blank. I took a step forward, then another, until I was almost within arm's reach. "Help!" I called out, voice cracking. "Please, I need help!" They didn't respond. Instead, one person, a woman with dark hair and a tattered jacket, turned her head slightly in my direction, but her eyes didn't meet mine. They remained fixed on the flames. "Please," I repeated, panic rising within me. "Something is chasing me." Finally, one of the men, tall and wiry, spoke up without taking his eyes off the fire. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was flat, emotionless, as if the weight of my fear meant nothing to him. "Can't you see I'm in danger?" I stumbled over my words, the urgency in my tone growing. The growl echoed through the trees, closer now. I felt it rumble beneath my feet. The woman turned her head fully now, a slow, deliberate movement. Her expression was strange, unsettling. "It's not us you should be worried about." Before I could respond, the bristling noise of undergrowth moving caught everyone's attention. Panic surged among the group. They scrambled to their feet, finally seeming aware of my presence and the danger closing in around us. I backed away, heart racing. "What do we do?" The tall man cast a terse glance at the woods before muttering, "We need to hide." "Hide?" I was incredulous. I could feel the growl vibrating through my bones now, getting louder. "Are you kidding? We have to run!" But they were already moving, retreating deeper into the shadows of the trees. I hesitated, torn between following and standing my ground. I glanced at the flickering flames and saw shadows darting through the tree line, low, hunched figures moving closer. "Come on!" a male voice yelled from within the trees. I dropped the question of trust and sprinted after them, desperate and scared. The woods closed in, branches snatching at me like hands. I lost my footing and stumbled, but their urgent whispers pulled me along. Then I saw it again. A flash of movement above and to the right, a figure shifting among the branches. I stopped, eyes wide, heart racing even faster than before. "Did you see that?" I gasped, breathless. "What?" one of them snapped, but they were already moving further in, deeper into the darkness. "No, we need to stay put," I shouted, but the others pressed on. I knew instincts were vital now. Whatever hunted me was close. Finally, malice ignited in the air, thick and potent. The growl filled my ears, shaking me to the core. "Someone's out there," I yelled, but no one seemed to hear me. The last thing I noticed was a pair of glowing eyes staring straight at me from the trees, hunger flashing within them. And then everything went dark. I woke up shivering, the cold biting into me like 1,000 needles. My thoughts scrambled as I tried to piece together how I got here. I was lying on the forest floor, damp with dew. The crackle of the campfire had faded, replaced with a chilling silence. I pushed myself up, the weight of dread pressing heavily on my chest. I squinted around, the dim light of dawn creeping through the trees. Panic returned when I noticed I was alone. "Hello?" My voice echoed weakly, swallowed by the stillness. "Where is everyone?" No answer. The air felt stale, too quiet. Instead of the warmth and comfort I'd hoped to find, a tightness wrapped around me, squeezing with every breath. I stood up slowly, scanning the area for any sign of movement. Then I saw it, a footprint in the soft mud, too large to belong to anyone in that group. My heart dropped. I hadn't just escaped whatever was chasing me, I had stepped right into something worse. The growl echoed again, but this time it was distant, lurking somewhere in the woods. I knew I couldn't stay here, but I also had no idea where to go. Frantic, I recalled the direction the group had taken. It could be a risk, but wandering aimlessly wasn't an option either. I moved cautiously through the trees, each step deliberate. Every sound made me jump. An owl, a branch creaking, the whisper of the wind. The woods felt alive, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. As I pressed deeper into the forest, I noticed something strange on the ground. Bits of fabric and a broken watch lay half buried in the leaves. I picked up the watch. Its face was cracked, the hands frozen at 3:27. My chest tightened, the fear flooding back. "What happened to you guys?" I mumbled, talking to an empty forest. Suddenly, I heard the growl again, closer now, a low rumble that sent chills down my spine. I dropped the watch and picked up my pace, adrenaline kicking in. I had to find them, or at least find shelter. Then I heard voices. I paused, straining to listen. They were faint but unmistakable. I followed the sound, hope igniting within me. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. As I approached, the voices grew clearer. They were arguing. "We can't leave her!" one shouted, panic evident in their tone. "But we can't go back!" another insisted, a strong desperation driving their words. I weaved through the trees, closer to the voices. That's when I caught sight of them, huddled in a small clearing. But something wasn't right. They were looking over their shoulders, fear etched on their faces, like prey, sensing a predator nearby. "Wait, it's me!" I called out, relief flooding my voice. But then their expressions changed to horror, and I froze. Before I could react, a rustle from behind the trees caught my attention. I turned slowly. The air thickened as shadows began to converge. My pulse quickened. There it was again, the growl. Louder, more menacing this time. And then I saw it. The creature emerged, tall and spectral, its eyes glinting with hunger. All thoughts of rescue faded as I stumbled back, the reality of my situation crashing down around me. Whatever was chasing me hadn't just been a figment of my imagination, and I had just walked right into the jaws of danger. My feet stumbled back, hitting the cold, damp ground. The creature loomed over me, its long limbs stretching like shadows beneath the dim light filtering through the trees. I could barely process what I was looking at. The grotesque shape was a nightmare given form. I fumbled for words, my mind racing for an escape. Just as I turned to run, a familiar voice called from behind me, "No, stay still!" It was Hannah, one of the friends I'd lost in the dark. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. I hesitated, torn between two choices, flee or trust her guidance. "She knows what it is!" shouted another voice, a guy I recognized, Matt. "It can't see you if you don't move." I froze, the urgency of the moment contradicting the instinct to run. The creature sniffed the air, its eyes narrowing as it focused on the scent of fear wafting from my direction. I could feel Hannah's weight against me, urging me to remain still. Suddenly, it lunged. Not at me, but at the space just to my right. No, I wanted to scream as I realized what that meant. It was hunting. I forced myself to breathe quietly, every ounce of my concentration focused on remaining hidden. The growl erupted again, reverberating through the trees as it snapped its enormous jaws, hitting nothing but air. The sound washed over me in waves of pure terror, but Hannah held me firm, her fingers digging into my arm. "Wait for it," she whispered, eyes darting around as if searching for some unseen cue. I could see Matt and the others now, backing away in unison, forming a loose circle. I barely noticed their movement, fixated on the creature that was somehow still searching for us, confused but still determined. Then I heard it, a rustling sound behind the creature, different from the soft brush of leaves in the wind. A second creature. My heart raced as I peered into the thickening fog rolling through the trees. "Group together!" Matt shouted, and I felt a jolt of leadership in his tone. I shuffled closer to Hannah, avoiding eye contact with the monster, while the clearing filled with whispers of panic. "We can't stay here," I hissed, glancing back to the shadows where the rustle had come from. Another growl rolled through the air, reverberating in my bones. There were two of them. Suddenly there was a thump, loud enough to drown out everything. I turned to look, just as the first creature leapt into the air, its claws outstretched toward whoever had made the wrong move. "That way!" Hannah yelled, pointing toward a narrow path veiled with bushes. Without thinking, I took her hand, adrenaline flooding my system. We rushed forward, breaking the circle of fear, leaving the others to fend for themselves. I had no idea if they would follow. I didn't want to look back. We pushed through the foliage, branches whipping across my face. Then, out of breath, I stumbled into a small, hidden clearing. But as soon as I stopped, dread filled my heart again. The growls had become a cacophony. We had redirected the monsters, but they were relentless. We weren't safe yet. And that's when I saw it. A cave entrance partially covered in vines, dark and ominous. The shadows behind us danced closer, and there was no time to think. I grabbed Hannah's hand and bolted toward the cave. Whatever horror awaited inside felt like a necessary risk. It was a chance to escape the nightmares chasing us in the open. As we ducked into the cave, the darkness welcomed us, swallowing every sound, leaving only an echo of our frantic breaths. I could hear the growls behind us dying away for a moment, but that didn't mean we were out of danger. With a lump in my throat, I questioned what lay ahead. "Are we safe?" I whispered, but deep down I feared the answer. The darkness of the cave embraced us like a shroud, the only sounds our uneven breaths and the trickling of water seeping through the rock. I could barely see Hannah beside me, her eyes wide with fear mirroring my own. It was suffocating, halfway between security and panic, hoping it would keep the growls at bay. "We have to keep moving," she breathed, her grip tightening around my wrist. I nodded, my heart still pounding in my chest. We stepped cautiously into the obscurity, the ground uneven beneath our feet as we fought against the urge to look back. The growls faded into the distance, but the unsettling feeling of being hunted lingered. Every scrape of stone against stone echoed with an unnerving intensity, making me jump at shadows. "What if they catch up?" I murmured. Doubts settled like cold fingers in my gut. Hannah halted, searching the darkness ahead. "There must be an exit somewhere. We just have to find it." Her voice was resolute, but uncertainty curled around her words. I could tell she felt it too, the weight of the unknown pressing against our backs. As we moved deeper into the cave, the air became cooler and damp, wrapping us like a thick fog. I could feel the moisture on my skin, the taste of earth lingering in the air. We stumbled forward, our eyes gradually adjusting to the dim light filtering in from crevices above. Suddenly, we found ourselves in a wider chamber. My chest tightened as I took in the surroundings. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like sharpened teeth, and the floor was littered with bones, small and large, some distinctly human. My mind raced with thoughts of what might have happened to their owners. Anxiety clawed at my throat. "We need to keep moving," I hissed, trying to keep the panic from spilling into my voice. But before I could start again, a whisper echoed through the cave clearer than ever. "Why did you leave?" Hannah turned to me, fear in her eyes. It was a question I had never wanted answered. "Was that—" "I don't know," I interrupted, cutting her off as I strained to hear more. The air felt charged, alive in a way that unnerved me. Time seemed to stretch in the darkness. A damp breeze blew past us, sending chills racing down my spine. Suddenly, panic flared again. I sensed something in the shadows, lurking just outside the reach of our dim visions. We pressed ourselves against the cool stone wall, hearts thundering as we waited. A silhouette flickered and darted just past the mouth of the chamber. "Run!" I urged, any semblance of hesitation gone. We bolted forward, racing deeper into the cave with the darkness closing in around us. The whispers turned to frenzied murmurs, swirling in the air like a ghoulish chorus. Each step echoed in the hollow chamber, as if the cave itself were alive and vibrating to the sound of our fear. Conditions changed in an instant as I stumbled upon a fork, two paths extending deeper into the cave. "Which way?" I gasped, breath quickening. "I don't know." "It's a decision we can't spend time deliberating." Hannah's voice crackled with urgency. I hesitated, sweat mingling with the cool dampness on my skin. In that moment, desperation and instinct clashed violently. With a single instinct-driven choice, I shouted, "Left!" and darted down the darkened corridor. We ran, the walls closing in as we pushed forward, neither of us daring to look behind. The echo of growls turned more frantic. It wasn't just one creature anymore. I could hear them converging on our location, their pursuit relentless. Then, as abruptly as it began, we stumbled into open air. Daylight flooded the cave, the blinding rays warming my face and dispelling some of the terror gripping my heart. "Out! We made it!" I shouted, and for the briefest moment hope surged through me as we rushed toward the light. But just as we crossed the threshold, something lunged from the shadows behind us. I barely had time to comprehend the aura of fear enveloping us before it struck. Hannah let out a sharp cry as I was thrown forward, tumbling out of the cave and onto the grass. As the chaos faded, I scrambled to my feet, spun around, and found myself staring into the void. The cave loomed behind me, the growls easing into haunting whispers. For a moment, I thought I saw figures flicker at the mouth of the cavern, but then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness, leaving an unsettling stillness hanging in the air. "Hannah!" I shouted, dread clawing at my insides, but I turned to find her standing behind me, dazed but whole. Relief flooded through me. We were alive, but at what cost? We had escaped, yet the tension between survival and the lingering darkness shadowed me as we grasped at our breath. "What happened back there?" she stammered, her eyes wide, reflecting confusion and dread. "I don't know," I replied, still reeling from the narrow escape, "but I think we're not safe yet." We backed away from the cave, keenly aware of how deeply the woods unfurled behind us. With every rustle in the trees and every whisper of wind through the branches, the questions loomed large. Were we truly free, or was the chase just beginning? I could still hear the echoes of the whispers in my mind, taunting me as we turned to leave, and I couldn't help but wonder what had truly been chasing me. Was it the darkness of the woods, or something more insidious lurking inside myself? As we made our way through the towering trees away from the cave, I couldn't shake the feeling that answering those questions would be a confrontation one day, not far ahead.